Welcome everyone to our webinar this evening, Advanced Diabetes Nutrition, Taking It to the Next Level. We have a great presentation this evening prepared for you, talking all about the ins and outs of diabetes in your diet. So we're very happy that you could join us this evening. Should you have any technical difficulties, there is a phone number to call at the bottom of the screen, and it's Log Me In Support. So um, our format includes a short presentation followed by an interactive discussion. To type in a question, use the question section of the webinar toolbar. The toolbar usually pops up to the right-hand side of your screen, which you can kind of drag and move it around out of your way if you would like, but that's how you'll ask a question. So we usually save those for the end of the presentation, but please feel free to ask questions. We look forward to an interactive webinar. We know that the information you're about to hear may motivate you to make lifestyle changes, so please consult your physician before making any changes to your current routine. This online Q&A session is intended to give general advice. This information is not a substitute for personal medical advice and involves the professional opinion of the Cecilia Health Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. Our webinar leader this evening is Michelle Dart. Michelle began her nursing career almost 30 years ago. She went on to get her master's degree and became a pediatric nurse practitioner. She has over 20 years experience working with children and adults with diabetes. Michelle became a certified diabetes care and education specialist in 2004 and has maintained her certification. Michelle has authored a nursing textbook, self-published diabetes-related books, and has been a contributing author for multiple publications, including Cecilia Health's blog. She fulfills her passion by coaching patients to make lifestyle changes that improve health and quality of life. Michelle has been with Cecilia Health since 2018. Today, she'd like to support you in some basic self-management of diabetes and overall wellness. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being with us this evening and for sharing with us your expertise. You may take it away.
Thank you. So today our discussion will include the following. We're going to talk about what is a carbohydrate and where do we even find those carbohydrates? Do I need to think about other nutrients other than those carbohydrates? You have that. And
so sorry. It seems like we may have lost our speaker. Um, Michelle, yeah. Um, I'm so sorry. Yes. So I'll just continue. Our discussion will include what is a carbohydrate and where is carbohydrate found? Do I need to think about other nutrients other than carbs? What is the glycemic index? How do I read a food label? What about fiber? Are sugar substitutes safe? How do I manage my diabetes using carbohydrate counting? And then we will certainly save time at the end for questions, answers, and sharing. So let's continue on. Food is made up of three. What is carbohydrate? Oh, here we go. Food is made up of three main nutrients. Proteins, which are
I'm
found in
hopefully I'm back.
there we go, Michelle. We can
I'm
hear you.
sorry.
Thank
I
you
am
so
so sorry. I
much.
got totally kicked out of the internet. So I
Okay,
apologize. I'm not sure where I got cut off. I know I was talking about those three main nutrients,
that's
protein,
right.
fat, and carbohydrates.
Yes, sorry
Um,
about that. Thank you,
where
Michelle.
did I get cut off? Was I talking about the protein, the fat, or the carbohydrate
I
part?
think we were still actually just still on the agenda, so still kind of right where I jumped
Oh,
there. It was early on, so
so okay, so I am going to start again on this screen where we're talking about those three main nutrients that we consume. Protein, we find that in foods such as meat, beans, dairy, cheese. Lean protein is going to be our best choice. That's going to be your turkey and chicken breast, your fish, your beans, low fat, milk or cheese. Fat is another thing that we will consume, and it's going to be found in oils, butter, margarine, dressings, nuts, avocado. It's those plant fats that are going to be your better option. That's your avocado, nuts, nut butter, and oils. Now, the carbohydrate that we hear about most often is found in starches, fruit, milk, and sugar. And there are three types that make up our total carbohydrates when you're looking at those food labels. That's your sugars, starches, and fibers combined. Um, so, a little bit more specific about carbohydrates, it is that main nutrient in food that raises our blood sugar levels. So, it is the first source of energy that we're going to utilize. And if we don't have the proper balance, we can have that converted into an elevated blood sugar. And it is the amount and type of carbohydrate you eat that determines how quickly your blood sugar level is going to change after eating. Carbohydrates from liquids, such as juices and soft drinks, are usually converted to blood sugar more quickly. Now, the carbohydrates from solid foods, such as pasta and fruits, are going to be slower to convert to a blood sugar. Now, there are foods that have no or very little carbohydrate that should also be part of your plate. Things that are going to have no or very little carbohydrate are your non starchy vegetables, butter, eggs, meat, poultry, fish, cheese, and nuts. And these foods do not have the ability to really significantly influence your blood sugar levels. That's not to say that you won't see sometimes a change in your blood sugar level from these food groups, but it is not going to be as significant as what you would see with the carbohydrates. We know people rarely eat just one food or nutrient at a time. Think about your plate. It's usually a variety of foods. And how high your blood glucose levels are going to go is going to depend on if you're having a mixed meal, that variety of foods, how much fat and protein you're eating, and the carbohydrates, how simple or refined are they? So those are all things that you want to consider when you're seeing how your blood sugar responds to a meal. For example, if you test your blood sugar 2 hours after the meal, that result is based on these things. And so you want to then think about what you had to eat and what out of this list may have had that impact. Um, it also could be an example of a burger on a bun with a salad is going to raise your blood sugar more slowly than if you were to consume the bun alone. So that's why you want a variety, because your body is going to utilize those different things at different rates. So, what is the glycemic index? Um, we hear about it, but what is it? The glycemic index measures how quickly and how high your blood sugar levels will rise in response to different foods. And it's really only the carbohydrate containing foods that have that glycemic index. And if you look off to the right of your slide, you can see the different levels. So a high glycemic index is going to be something that's 70 and above. A medium level glycemic index is going to be 55 to 69. And a low glycemic index, which is what you would want to strive for, is 54 or less. Now, those high glycemic foods can raise your blood sugar levels within as little as 15 minutes after eating. So that is why if you take insulin with your meal, they want you to take it as you're sitting down to eat your meal, because we know how quickly that blood sugar can rise from the food you're consuming. Those high glycemic foods are going to be like your white bread, bagels, cornflakes, puffed rice, bran flakes, instant oatmeal, rice, pasta, potatoes, pumpkin, pretzels, rice cakes, popcorn, saltine crackers, melons, and pineapple. So many things that are really high glycemic foods. So if you want to consume those, you really want to consider your portion size. The smaller the portion size, the better the option. Now, your low glycemic foods, they're going to have a more modest effect on your blood sugar levels, and it might take a bit longer to actually see it rise. The foods that are in the low glycemic range are your 100% whole wheat or pumpernickel bread, oatmeal, the rolled or steel cut, oat bran. Now, I'm not sure I pronounced this one, muesli, barley, bulgur, sweet potato, corn, yam, lima or butter beans, peas, legumes, and lentils, most fruits, non starchy vegetables, and carrots are going to be your low glycemic options. So they're better to choose from. So, again, you should choose more foods that are low glycemic index, because they'll raise those blood sugar levels less and more gradually, and you'll likely feel full longer from these foods. Like, they satisfy your appetite better, and may assist with weight loss efforts. So if you have weight loss goals, this is something to consider as well. When you choose those high glycemic index foods, you really do want to monitor your blood sugar after eating to see how high it goes. This will help you learn your body's response to different foods and which ones make you feel your best. Um, and it also is a good idea to have a conversation with your provider. You know, what are my goals? What kind of numbers should I be seeing after my meals? Um, what is my target? So you have a better idea if after eating those high glycemic foods, are you falling in that goal range, or should you consider maybe a smaller portion size or maybe a different food option next time? So, how to read a food label. Um, there's actually a lot of information packed into just a small space. We always start at the top where it's telling us what the serving size actually is. How many servings are in this container that I'm looking at? Um, so I know Is this full container one serving? Or is it like this one? For example, the serving size is half a cup. So this package actually has 4 serving sizes. Um, if you were to eat the entire package, you'll then have had 4 servings, and then you need to change the math on the rest of the label. Um, we like to look at the calories and how many calories we get from fat. That's going to be one of the first things that you'll see um, below where it says amount per serving. The nutrients here in orange are those ones that we really want to limit. Those are your fats, cholesterol, sodium. Those are the things that we really want to be as low as possible. And then here below, you have your total carbohydrates. So that consists of your dietary fiber and your sugars on the label here. So we'll talk a little bit more about that fiber piece and in just a little bit. And then there's your protein. Here they like to show you, how much of some of these other nutrients that we do want to try to get. We need a variety of nutrients. This is looking to strive to get as much of these nutrients as you can. Now up here to the right, where it's kind of like a turquoise blue, it says quick guide to percent daily value. 5% or less is considered low. 20% or more is high. Um, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the percentage that's included in the label. And then down below, um, we have more footnotes and really just based on a 2,000 calorie diet and what values you might be striving for. And it also shows on this one, like if your goal was a 2,500 calorie diet. So that's a quick run through, but really we could pick apart a lot of these individual sections and talk more about it. But this is just to get you to kind of start looking, know what you're looking for, and just getting familiar. The more you look at those food labels, the more familiar you are with them and kind of go right to some of the things that you are particularly interested in based on your own health needs. So you do also want to check the ingredients list. So this can be a little sneaky. Ingredients are listed in descending order by weight. Those in the largest amounts are always listed first. So you want to look for whole grain to be the first ingredient in those starchy foods. You also want to take a look and see, are there other words for sugar? This is where it can be sneaky, that we don't see it say sugar directly. It could also say things like dextrose, cane sugar, corn sweetener, corn syrup solids, evaporated cane juice, fructose, fruit juice concentrates, high fructose corn syrup, malt syrup, concentrated fruit juice, and maltodextrin. So those are other words for sugar. So things that you want to look for. Now, the fiber. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate, just like the sugars and starches, but it's just not broken down by the body and doesn't contribute to any calories. On the food label, the fiber is listed right under that total carbohydrate because fiber does not raise blood glucose levels. The grams of fiber can actually be subtracted from the total grams of carb on the label to get your total carbohydrate for doing your maybe dosing for your insulin. Um, Many foods that contain fiber are like your fruits, vegetables, whole grain breads, cereals, and pastas. They also contain sugar and or starch, which need to be counted. Um, so if you look at the label on the right, it's showing you that there's a total carbohydrate of 13 grams and there's a dietary fiber of 3 grams. So if we subtract that fiber from the total carbohydrate, we come up with 10 grams of available carbs. So this is what you would do your math on. This is the amount of carbs I'm consuming. Since we're not counting the fiber, you would use 10 grams for the math. Now, another thing that a lot of people like to ask about are these sugar substitutes. We know straight sugar is going to raise our blood sugar. So what can we do? Because we want some sweet taste. We like to sweeten different things that we eat or drink, but how can we do that and still have a blood sugar in a range that we're comfortable with? So below, I won't read through exactly each one of them, but you can look at this chart and just glancing at it, all of these sugar substitutes, except for the last one, will be 200 to 600 times as sweet as sugar. Now, you can look to the far right, and it tells you if there's no effect on the blood sugar level, or as an example, Splenda or the sucralose can affect the blood glucose levels if you consume a large quantity at one time. But the one that you want to pay attention to, because it doesn't have any effect on the blood glucose levels, are really going to be your equal, your sweet and low, your sweet one or sunnet, a sweet leaf, Truvia, or Stevia. Those are the ones that you really would want to choose, knowing that they're going to have the lesser effect. Now, natural sugar substitutes are really known as sugar alcohols. You may have heard that term before. The sugar alcohols are typically less sweet than sugar. They provide half the calories of sugar. And since half the carbohydrate of sugar alcohols is not absorbed by the body, you can subtract half the sugar alcohol grams from the total carb grams on the label. Some examples are listed here: the erythritol, glycerol, isomalt, lactolol, maltolol, mannitol, sorbitol, and xylitol. Almost all of them end in "all." And even though they are called sugar alcohols, they do not contain alcohol. One word of caution, though, is too much of anything is not a good thing. So understanding that these sugar alcohols are not absorbed by the body, our body does have to, get rid of things that we aren't necessarily utilizing. If you have too much of the sugar alcohols, it can cause some gastrointestinal symptoms that could be uncomfortable. So belly cramping, diarrhea. So even things that are better options, too much of can be it cause some side effects. Now, what about carb counting? People that take insulin often dose their insulin based on their carbohydrates and their blood sugar. There's a little bit of math involved. But in carb counting, you can either use it to do the math and dose that rapid acting mealtime insulin, or it can help you to maintain consistent carbs if you're using oral medication. So tools that you might want to have available. One would be a measuring cup and scale. And you don't need an expensive one. You can buy something at the dollar store or Walmart that would work. An app or a reference book to look up carb content of various foods can really be helpful in the beginning as you're getting familiar with what you're eating. This reference here, the Calorie King, is, I believe, updated yearly and is a great resource. And that is in a book or an app. And the food label will be helpful for you to calculate your carbs. So before you eat, it's best to measure or weigh your portion and look up the grams of carb that portion has in that app reference book or on the food label. So that's how you would get started. Like I said, if you're not taking rapid acting mealtime insulin, you want to try to keep your grams of carbohydrates consistent for each meal. It doesn't mean you need to eat the same exact foods, just the same amount of carbs. Now, if you do take rapid acting insulin, you can speak with your doctor or your diabetes coach about dosing your insulin based on how much carb you are eating. They will give you a dosing recommendation of 1 unit of insulin will cover so many grams of carbs. And it'll be different for everybody. So that's why you'd want to talk with your provider to get that ratio figured out where's a safe place to start. By checking your blood sugars 2 hours after meals, you can really help determine what's the proper dose for the carbohydrates you tend to be eating more often. So an example, just to help you, start thinking about, how do I really calculate this out? You have an apple and peanut butter as a snack. You're going to weigh that apple. Let's say, for example, it weighs 3 ounces. You measure the peanut butter. It's 2 tablespoons. The reference book is going to tell you that that 3-ounce apple is equivalent to 15 grams of carbs. Now, the peanut butter, you're going to want to look at the food label, and that's going to tell you that the 2 tablespoons is equivalent to 6 grams of carbs. So you're going to add those 2 amounts together, and you're going to come up with a total of 21 grams. So that's kind of perfect, falls right in that recommended range for carbohydrates for a snack, which is 15 to 30 grams. That's the basic recommendation. Your provider may have a more specific recommendation for your snacks. Now, an example for a meal. Let's say you're going to have chicken breast, rice, broccoli, and some pudding for dessert. You're going to measure that portion of rice, and it comes out to about 2/3 cup. Measure the broccoli, and that measures 1 cup. Measure your pudding, and that's 1/2 cup. Your chicken is protein, so it really has no carbohydrate, so we don't have to add that into our equation. The app is telling you that third that's an error. It says 1/3 cup of rice when earlier we measured 2/3 cup. So sorry I didn't catch that before. But the 1/3 cup rice is 15 grams of carb. So, oh, I didn't read farther. Sorry about that. So 15 grams of carbs, and you're doubling that because you are having 2/3 cup instead of 1/3 cup. So that comes up to the 30 grams total. The app tells you 1 cup of broccoli is 6 grams of carbs. So we're going to add that in. And then the label on the pudding says 1/2 cup is 25 grams of carbs. Together, that equals 61 grams of carbs. And just a general goal range for a meal would be 45 to 60 grams of carbs. Now, it really can vary. So again, your healthcare provider can give you a more specific recommendation for what your mealtime carb count should be. Okay. Now, there are some tips and tricks for successful, easy carb counting. We do tend to go back and eat the same foods again and again. So once you've measured and calculated the carbs of some of the things you more commonly eat, you won't need to do it again and again. And as long as you are eating the same amount, that trick will work. It's a good idea to, once a month, kind of check in on yourself, remeasure just to make sure that your visualizing is accurate with your estimated portion sizes. Many foods have a food label, so it is easy to look up the grams of carbs when you see the food label. For fresh foods, it is more important that you weigh. Nobody really knows what a 3-ounce apple looks like unless they've weighed several apples and then judge with a trained eye if it's larger or smaller than 3 ounces. Um, but you'll want to weigh them a few times to kind of get familiar with what does that really look like for 3 ounces. So today's presentation, we've talked about a variety of things, things that we covered that hopefully you've gained increased knowledge and understanding of the following advanced diabetes nutrition concepts would be, which foods contain carbohydrates and which foods don't? What is the glycemic index and how does it relate to my blood sugars? And what are those important items to read on the food label? What should I be focusing on? How does fiber affect my health in diabetes? What are sugar substitutes that are safe to use? And how do I count carbohydrates to better control my blood sugars? Um, so that's just a quick summary. Just going to glance and see if we have any questions. I'm not seeing any yet, but if you have a question, please type it in. I'd love to help answer some of your questions. I know one thing we didn't really cover is the plate method. And the plate method is really good for visualization. And I don't know how familiar you are with it, but half of your plate is intended to be more your vegetables and fruit. Then you split the other half of your plate in half, and then 1/4 of your plate gets the protein, and the other quarter of your plate would be your carbohydrates. So when we're trying to picture our carbohydrate serving, it really is just that 1/4 of your plate. Um, you want the very low glycemic index foods um, or no carbohydrate foods on that other half of the plate. Um, and that just helps give you that balance if you visualize your plate so that you do have that variety, because it will slow that rise of blood sugar after the meal, and hopefully keep it from rising as much as if you had eaten more of half a plate of carbs. Your blood sugar is definitely going to rise more. But any questions about anything? It could be a little overwhelming when first starting to do the carbohydrate counting. Um, the measuring, the weighing feels like it's a lot of work, but it really is just more kind of an investment up front of your time to get familiar with it. And after a little while, you'll be surprised that you may not need to use the measuring cups and scales as much because you get good at visualizing what is that portion size. Um, but yeah, it's a little bit of an investment up front.
Mhm. Hey, Michelle, we do have a few questions if you want me to. I'm not
Ah,
sure if you can
I'm not
see them.
seeing them.
Yeah. I can read them off to you if you want. Um, if you if you can't see them, sometimes it's hard to. I expanded the box out so I can read them, but there's a question here coming in that says, "Are fruit and vegetable-based carbs better for you than processed carbs like pasta, rice, and baked goods?"
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything plant based, so your fruits and your vegetables are going to always be your healthier options. Um, so yeah, any of the processed foods tend to have other ingredients, and you really need to sift through those ingredients for some of those hidden words that I was telling you about earlier in the presentation. So really, if you're going to use boxed or prepackaged foods, really look at it thoroughly, including those ingredients.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah. Okay, there's another one that says, can you cover the glycemic index again? How do you know the glycemic index?
So that is actually, a great question because it's not on your food label, is it? Um, it would be doing a little bit more research. I'm not sure if the most up to date resource, the Calorie King, has glycemic index in it, and it very well does. Um, I can look that up in just a moment if Calorie King has glycemic index.
Yeah, in my experience, you should just be able to like Google the glycemic index of foods. It's a
Always,
pretty,
you could always
mhm,
search and say, what is the glycemic index
yes,
of? Um,
it's a pretty
but
standardized. Oh,
yeah, it's definitely more available, but it would be nice if they would include that on those food labels.
mhm. Okay. There is another one here that says, could you subtract the fiber in the last meal because I don't consider broccoli a carb? So I'm not sure if she's referring
Yeah,
back
so
to that
so
slide.
there's fiber in the broccoli. So you're wondering, do you maybe
Hmm.
subtract the broccoli from the total carbs of your meal? You could. Some people will do that. Um, I know when I first started practicing, we didn't really subtract the fiber from our total carb count. But more recent recommendations are getting that nitty gritty with the math and decreasing it by the amount of fiber, and then using that carbohydrate total as your dosing mechanism or as your total carbs that you're trying to be consistent with at your meal times.
Okay. There is another one here that says, I've heard that birch sugar or birch wood sugar is another name for xylitol. Is that another
Mm.
ingredient to watch for?
Yeah. So xylitol is actually extracted from corn fiber or birch trees. So yeah, and any one of those would be something to be looking for. So it xylitol is a sugar alcohol, and you can find it naturally and some things like berries, plums, corn, oats, mushrooms, lettuce, trees, some other fruits. So yeah, I would be looking at that in the ingredient list as well. Did I answer that question okay?
I think so.
Not being able to see them, I don't know why I can't.
I know. No, I think you did. Xylitol you would see on an ingredient listing on a food label.
Yes.
You would not see birch sugar or birch wood sugar. I don't believe, but you would see xylitol. So, um, okay. And she says, yes, thank you for you answering her
Oh,
question
good.
about it. Uh-huh.
Very
Yeah.
good. Very good.
All
Any
right.
other questions?
Let's
Those were
see
all
if,
great questions.
mhm, I think so too. Let me see if there's others. Think for now, I think that's all I see.
Okay. I was trying to see if I could find Calorie King, if it has glycemic index, to see if that would be a good resource for glycemic index. Hmm. It does have, the Calorie King does have information in there on the glycemic index. So yeah, that's a great resource to include even that. So any other questions pop up?
That is all I see for now. I think
Okay.
there may have been just one more that came through. Okay, there is one more that just came through. um, it says, well, I think ALCH sugars can give you severe indigestion. Maybe they're talking about sugar alcohols.
Oh,
Yeah.
sugar
Is
alcohols.
there a way to
Yes, it can.
yeah, it says, is there a way to use them and mitigate the effects? I think that's the
In
question.
moderation. In moderation. For example, like I was taking care of somebody newly diagnosed with a child, and the family was all like, we just want to be supportive and let's choose healthier options and we'll all do it together. Well, they decided to get some sugar free candy and they all kind of overindulged. And they all ended up with that gastrointestinal upset. Um, so really just moderation is your best option to avoid that kind of a side effect from it. Small amounts isn't going to do that. And hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, one more just came through that I see. It says, my dad is diabetic and eats soda crackers for his main snack. Is there a low glycemic
Mm,
substitute I could try for him?
something with a whole grain in it. I guess I would compare a label like with a wheat thin that might be a little bit healthier option. But, also, considering sodium content too. And I think like a soda cracker probably is higher in sodium as well, which isn't good. So I would look at like a whole wheat, whole grain kind of cracker and see if that would be something that he would eat. I know my father had type 2 diabetes, and we were always trying to find substitutes for some of the snacks and things that he liked, but we knew there were healthier options. So it was kind of a, try this, try that, and see, what he would be most likely to eat. And hoping, giving him those healthier choices, he's going to pick one of them over what he was usually eating that maybe was raising the blood sugar. And sometimes with our parents, yeah, it's a matter of just kind of finding that balance, something that they will accept based on taste and texture, because so many things will affect, their food choices. And, not wanting to give up the part of it that we enjoy. And it might be, the texture, it could be the taste. So seeing what is it that he really likes about that cracker and see what would be a better, healthier option that would be more of a whole grain. Any other questions?
I do not see any more for now. So
Okay. Well, I mean, if there aren't any other questions, um, just be aware there are more upcoming live events. Um, the next one is August 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard, and it's Blood Sugar Boot Camp, the ins and outs of blood sugar testing, and that would be a great one to check out. Um, you know, getting comfortable with the blood sugar monitoring, looking, at the data. What do we do with that information once we've done that blood sugar check? Might be helpful resource. You might want to make a note of that. And then there are some other resources. There is a Facebook group. Cecilia Health also has a blog, which has some valuable information in there. Might be worth checking out as well. Just leaving it there for a moment in case you wanted to write any of that down. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your attendance and participation, and great questions. Thank you so much, and hope to do another talk with you soon. I hope you all have a great evening.